Here we are. Hi, I'm Dr. Gail Randall. I'm a board-certified internist, gastroenterologist, functional medicine doctor, and integrative practitioner. So I am here today because I wanted to discuss with you leaky gut. But instead of just giving you a lecture, I'd like to do it the way I like to teach, which is telling a story. So I'm going to tell you a story, and then within that story, you'll learn a lot about the gut. You'll learn a lot about leaky gut, how you might get it, if you do have it, what to do for it, and how to recognize it, okay? So, because I myself, believe it or not, as pristine as I try to keep my gut, had this challenge in my life. A couple years ago, my extremely wonderful exterminator, who literally goes under my house every 2 weeks, came out from under my house and said, Dr. Randall, you have mold under your house. I said, what? He says, yeah, it seems like it's coming from this little small bathroom here. And I said, how can that be? There's no leak. There's no problem here. And, the more we investigated, as it is with houses sometimes, the worse it became. So as we dug into it, it was a very unusual situation where the water was leaking in between the floors. So on top, you saw nothing. And even when he went under there every 2 weeks, he saw nothing until one day it overflowed enough to where it grew mold. There was still no water showing underneath. I tried to claim it on my insurance, and they said, anytime there's mold, there's been a chronic problem and you didn't pay attention to it. I said, well, how's that possible? Because we had no evidence. I wasn't ignoring anything. I'm very pristine about my house. So the bottom line is the plumber found that it was some kind of back pressure, and that was weird. But this was right at the end of December, towards the end of December, and Christmas was coming. And so we decided, me and my family, my son and my granddaughters and my daughter-in-law, that it might be better if we did Christmas at their house. So we did. We had a lovely time, lots of love and hugs and presents, and we always have a lovely time at Christmas. But when I came home from their house the day after Christmas, I opened the door to find what was about to change my life forever. My house, my beautiful dream house, was 3 inches deep in poop. Oh my God, the worst kind of flood you can possibly have. First of all, try to get someone to come to your house on the day after Christmas and help you. Impossible. So here I am with this house full of poop, and I really didn't know what to do, but I had to do something. So I called the park. I live in the Point Dume Club. I called the park, and they sent over someone, and the result was and this didn't happen until the next day, but so what do? You clean it up. You think, well, this is temporary. This is not a big deal. I put gloves on. I put galoshes on. I really didn't touch it, but I cleaned up as much as I could. And then I tried to find a way to get out of the house. So the park manager, one of them, the one that does the grounds, came over, and they ran an endoscope down the sewage pipe. And they found a root ball about as big as a basketball in the main line. It was so ironic because I helped invent video endoscopy back at the VA hospital years ago. And here he was using an endoscope for a sewage pipe to show me what was going to write my history. This root ball. And crazily enough, the sewage only came into my house. So I came to find out, I got some remediators to come, great company, Dry Down, and Moises and his band of heroes. I'm telling you, they really are. You should see them get out of their truck, with the glasses on. It's like, Mission Impossible or something, and it was like a Mission Impossible, and they had to basically rip out the whole inside of my house. And I was exposed to it. So I got a place in 4 days, which I thought was pretty good, but it wasn't good enough because my body started to react. This is one way you get into the leaky gut category, or a dysbiosis, call it what you may, is contamination. And of course, stress can cause it too because it kills off all the good bacteria. So this was a rather stressful event, and it ended up changing, like I said, the course of my life. I moved across the street and I became very ill. I began having, this isn't TMI, but think about it as just a case report. I began having 20 bowel movements a day, watery. So I was afraid. So I went to Western doctors who were my students, best gastroenterologists in town. They found nothing. I went to my good old standby and did a stool test. They found nothing. I said, there's nothing here. There's not, I'm not a, person that goes for secondary gain. I have a serious problem here. So I found this company called Diagnostics. And oh my God, they do RNA testing, which is basically using your DNA to see your entire microbiome. So there are a number of these kind of companies now, but then that was the gold standard. And the other stool tests that I sent to the regular hospital and to the other sort of new age type testing showed nothing. This RNA test, oh my God, I had third world country. I had Shigella, I had Salmonella, I had Entamoeba histolytica, and a plethora of dysbiotic or bad bacteria. Any one of those could cause this, but I had them all at the same time, and it's very ironic because it came from sewage from, elite Malibu. So don't, it's not safe anywhere. So anyway, I began to treat it naturally. As a gut doctor, I knew what to do, how to treat it. And I began to get better slowly because for the period of time I had the 20 bowel movements a day, I lost 35 pounds. And that's pretty dramatic for a person, 60 years of age. And I kept functioning, but everybody kept seeing me melting away. And of course I had terrible symptoms, cramping. Sometimes I had to take 2 pairs of pants to work because I couldn't hold it. So that's like a worst case scenario of leaky gut dysbiosis. I ended up healing myself. Thank God I'm an expert gut doctor. I used high-powered enteric-coated oregano. I used glutamine to calm my gut down. I coupled it up with a product which is high in berberine. And if you give milk thistle with berberine, it intensifies it. And I took tons and tons of good probiotics and prebiotics. So I reestablished my gut health and I gained 25 pounds of muscle. So I've rebuilt my body. It is possible. And I'm sure that a lot of you or people have lesser cases. So if I can heal, they can heal. This is something that we can do together. So that was the story to introduce it. Of course, I've alluded to this, but one of the other things that causes it is stress. Stress chemicals kill off your good bacteria in your gut. Most of the bacteria live in your colon. And when you kill off the good bacteria, there's always opportunists around ready to take advantage. And they find open apartments and they say, let's move in here and, make a party or, take over. And the quote unquote bad bacteria cause your gut lining to react. Your gut lining is meant to keep out bad things, bad bacteria, and toxins from your system. It's strangely enough, it's 1 cell layer thick, the skin of your gut. Isn't that amazing? And although it has a lot of convolutions and villi, they call them, to increase your absorptive surface, but it's basically 1 cell layer thick, and if it gets irritated, it gets swollen. Just like you fall down and skin your knee, it gets swollen. And when that gut gets swollen, those one layer cells, which are bound together by these things called tight junctions, kind of like the little lines on my hand, that's to keep out toxins, keep out bad things, and only accept good things. So the food in a healthy situation goes through the brush border, is processed by those columnar cells, which is one cell layer thick, and then goes into your bloodstream in a controlled fashion. When it gets swollen because of leaky gut, dysbiosis, or like what I had from contamination, those cells drift apart. So the food still goes through the brush border, still processed, going in your bloodstream, but also straight through. And what's even worse is the endotoxins from the bad bacteria, the dysbiotic bacteria, go straight through and get in your system, and then that causes inflammation. Depending on how long you let it go on, you can end up getting arthritis, any kind of inflammatory disease, which the common denominator for all illness and death is inflammation. So you could get eczema. I saw a gal yesterday who had eczema, most likely, almost certainly from a leaky gut. After examining her, looking at her tongue, listening to what she ate. Okay, so that's another way to get into the leaky gut category. If you eat poorly, and when I mean poorly is lots of sugar, bread, which is just cake without frosting, pasta, anything that's refined, ground down into a powder and pressed out into a cracker, a cookie, a biscuit, a cupcake, that's all sugar. Okay, and then you promote the growth and attract bad bacteria, perhaps yeast, and that can cause this quote-unquote dysbiotic condition. So if you're having symptoms like abdominal bloating, cramping, either diarrhea or constipation, particularly the bloating, if you look at your tongue in the mirror and it looks white, you have got a dysbiosis, and when you have it, that spells leaky gut. Now, the really bad thing about leaky gut is not only does it go into your system and causes systemic inflammation, it gives signals to your brain. Emran Meyer, who's going to be my next podcast guest, I'm happy to announce, podcast is called Soul Stories, going to start in December, and he wrote the New York Times bestseller, Mind Gut Connection. And he tells in great detail how the gut communicates with the brain. It does it in many ways. And this is really fascinating to me because not only is it sort of an endocrine organ, and you don't usually think of your gut as an endocrine organ, but it is. There are lots of neurotransmitters in there. 90% of your serotonin, which is your calming neurotransmitter, helps you sleep, helps you feel calm. It's your buffer to stress. We need it. So serotonin and GABA together are your partners, and they're your buffers to stress. So if something's wrong with your gut, then you're not going to have that serotonin. You're not going to have the GABA that comes from the good bacteria. And you're going to go into a stressful situation and fall down or feel anxious, or you're just going to feel anxious, period. So if you do feel anxious, there are also bacteria that can get in there in dysbiosis that can cause agitation and even anxiety. And so people are being treated with antidepressants and antipsychotics when they really may just have an imbalanced gut. So it's always important to look in the gut. In my book, I have a chapter called Happy Gut, Happy Life, and I really believe that all of life comes from the gut. So, and it has to do with what you eat. It has to do with your lifestyle. Of course, exercise helps. But if you eat lots of sugary stuff and heavy fats, that's going to promote an unhealthy gut. If you eat good, mostly plants and fruits have a lot of prebiotic elements in them, the right kind of fiber to support the good bacteria. So the good bacteria, what are the good bacteria? Well, we're still in the process of figuring that out, but we know I have a probiotic that I designed. It's called Symbiotic, which has prebiotics and probiotics in it. You can get it on the Randall Wellness Store or call the office. But it's really important to understand how this works, because we do know that we need prebiotics to support the probiotics. And the prebiotics come from plant foods. There's also a plant called acacia, and it's apparently a really good prebiotic. I prefer blueberries and good old mangoes, lots of fiber. And it's really helpful to keep those good bacteria maintained, because good bacteria, probiotics, when you take them, guess what? They only last 2 weeks. Is that crazy? They don't hang on. They have no way of hanging on. So if you keep feeding in the prebiotics and you eat fermented foods, which promote the good bacteria, and then take a good probiotic, you're going to keep your gut happy. There's 2 bacteria we know that are really important. So when you're buying one, or you buy mine, if you turn it around and read it, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, very important. Lactobacillus reuteri, very important. We know those 2, they should be there in your probiotic. If they're not, you're probably not taking the right one. There's all different strengths. It used to be they were too weak. Now I sometimes find they're too strong. When you have people that are getting a little bit close to SIBO, and we'll talk about that, small bowel bacterial overgrowth, where you get too many bacteria in the small bowel, if you give too strong of an probiotic, that reminds me to come back and talk about that. But if you give too strong of a probiotic, you can actually cause them the same symptoms as having the leaky gut. You get gas and bloating and whatnot. So you got to size the probiotic for the person and what's going on with them. Okay, we do this GI map test. That's the one that saved my life. You can see how many good bacteria they are. I am more and more seeing an excess of good bacteria, where before it was always a deficiency. So people are on to eating fermented foods, they're on to eating probiotics, but sometimes they're way too strong. I had a lady, she just said, I just keep getting bloating and gas and blah, blah, blah. Is he taking a probiotic? Yeah, the best. I said, really? Yeah. She goes, it's 70 billion or 700 billion or something like that. I said, that's too much for you. That's too much for you. So when we cut it back, she improved, got better, very thankful. So the prebiotics, the probiotics, now back to, I mentioned Freudian slip, I mentioned antibiotics. That's another way to get into the leaky gut department. If you have to take antibiotics, you have an abscessed tooth, of course you have to. If you have a lung infection, you have to. It's going to save your life. But then remember, let me bone up on my probiotics, because that is going to put me out of balance. If you don't do anything about it, you'll get out of balance. And then you'll start getting the same symptoms. So that's the thing. And other ways to get into the leaky gut category, I mentioned we have stress, we have contamination, we have antibiotics, we have diet, and then of course there's lifestyle. If you don't exercise and take good care of yourself in other ways, that can cause it also. So keep your gut healthy and happy, and you're going to be happy. Another thing I wanted to talk about, as I mentioned, was SIBO. So that's when most of your bacteria, as I mentioned before, are in your colon. When the bacteria move up into your small bowel, that's when you get small bowel bacterial overgrowth. What causes that? Well, there are a couple different things. Mark Pimentel from Cedars-Sinai first discovered or reported SIBO in 2004. And he was noticing that people with small bowel overgrowth had a certain bacteria that produced too much methane, or another bacteria that produced too much hydrogen. And they were using the antibiotic rifaximin to get rid of it. That is good, but it recurs almost more than 50% of the time. So it becomes a very difficult problem. They went on to study it further. These guys are pretty amazing. And they found that if you put people on an elemental diet. And they make this, you can get it from various companies. One of the companies is Integrative Therapeutics, which gives your bowel and your body everything that it needs, but it does and all the food substances, but it's in like an amino acid form, so it gives you bowel rest at the same time. And it doesn't feed the bacteria in your gut, or the bad ones. So on an elemental diet for it's like 3 weeks, you can reduce the methane producers by 80%, whereas Rifaximin only reduces it by 50%. Pretty amazing. So this diet is better than the antibiotic, and the antibiotic is kind of like chasing your tail, because when you take it, it gets rid of the bad bacteria, the symptoms go away, but they come back, and then you're down on your good bacteria and sort of struggling, running, and to try to catch up. It's like that. So this is kind of interesting. I thought you might appreciate this. Did you know, we're supposed to have these passengers inside us, right? These bacteria. It used to be that we were the same as our environment. What was in us is what was without us, because we scavenged, way back when we were evolving, and the way that we evolved was we were constantly repopulating ourselves from the earth and eating things that maybe touched the dirt. Dirt, it turns out to be good for you. There's these things called spore biotics, which come from dirt. And sometimes that's better for people that are having gas or too many bacteria, small bowel bacterial overgrowth, the spore biotics. Or go out in your garden and play in the dirt. But the spore biotics are kind of designed for that. So we were one with our environment when we evolved. That was the Garden of Eden, I guess. But now we live in 4 square walls. All of our food is plastic wrapped, irradiated, microwaved. Has tons of microplastics in it. And the water, that's another thing that can cause leaky gut, is that kind of contamination. That kind of shocked me when I learned that, the microplastics. Or, everybody today, you see them with the water bottle. The plastic water bottle. Please get a steel water bottle or a safe plastic to drink your water from. Those water bottles are poisoning you. And they're poisoning the earth, too. You could surround the world a few times with the amount of plastics that we have. There are 30,000 times more gut microbes than cells in your body. And there are 100,000 times more microbes in your gut than there are people on Earth. Shocking. Can you imagine if you added up all the microbes in all of us, how many there would be? But the deal is, we have a symbiotic relationship with these organisms, meaning we need them and they need us. They make B vitamins, they make vitamin K, which stops us from having bleeding problems. The B vitamins, you cannot make DNA from RNA without B vitamins. Crucial. They're crucial for our balance, and because if our guts aren't balanced, we're not digesting and absorbing food. People say you are what you eat, but really there's a Dr. Myers, who's also a gut doctor, and she astutely says you are what you eat, digest, and absorb. So she calls our attention to that, and we need to be mindful of that, because if we're not eating right and we're eating at McDonald's every day and lots of buns and French fries and bad oils, we're not going to absorb and digest right. And we're going to start expressing that. When you're young, you kind of get away with it, doesn't show. Later on, it catches up with you and it shows. So you see these people with these big tummies that stick out. That's probably, for sure, an imbalance. So the other thing that reminds me that can cause imbalance in your gut is excess alcohol. Alcohol, you can measure the leakiness of a gut. There are certain tests you can do. And if you give them one hard alcohol drink, they immediately have leaky gut. So can you imagine someone that drinks all the time or every day or something? Everybody's been waving at me. Thank you for that. Thank you for joining me. So let's review a little bit. What can cause leaky gut? Poor diet, lifestyle, illness, stress, antibiotics. We said all of those things. The interesting thing is it's not just diarrhea in terms of symptoms. You could also get constipation. So either one, gas, bloating, abdominal pain, and of course, our immunity. Our immunity resides in our gut. We're all born with thymuses. These thymuses are up here in our chest. And when we're toddlers, those thymuses involute, and all those bacteria move out and move into our gut in these chains of sort of lymph nodes called Peyer's patches. And that's where our immunity harkens from. So you need to take care of your gut to take care of your immunity. So remember that. Now, so there's certain things that you can treat your gut with. Another thing that can cause it, we're going to talk about supplements, but if you're taking a lot of supplements that have magnesium stearate or titanium dioxide, that can actually cause leaky gut. So read the excipients in your supplements. We keep our supplements at Randall Wellness free from those additions. They're additives to sort of fill up the rest of the capsule or get the stuff to bind together, but you don't need them and to make a proper supplement, and you got to look at your supplement, make sure you're not getting them. Those are low quality. So we talked about prebiotics and probiotics. I mentioned fiber that comes from fruit, but there's another one, HMO, human milk oligosaccharides. Now, I'm a vegan, so I don't do milk products, but for those that do, be sure you're doing organic, because the mommy concentrates everything good into that milk to feed her baby, but she'll also concentrate all the toxins. But if you do drink organic milk, you're going to get those HMOs. Some of the supplement powders out there have it in there. I don't, because my powder is vegan and organic, 100%. But that's just another thing that can help you if you're a milk drinker. Other foods that can help you, are herbs are like fennel, licorice, ginger helps the gut. Glutamine I mentioned before, and just stay away from the sugar for sure. That's the main thing. We already talked about the tight junctions. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about, some people take NSAIDs, people that work out a lot, people that have sore joints. NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, actually loosen your tight junctions and can lead to leaky gut, as well as heart disease, which has been disclosed, and ulcers. So if you have joint pain, seek out a functional medicine doctor like myself, because there are things you can do for that joint pain that work almost just as well as NSAIDs. Maybe not as quickly, but they do. If you use water-soluble theracumin or lipid-soluble curcumin, like we have in the Randall Wellness store, that gets into your bloodstream and causes high levels of free curcuminoids, that's what you're really after, then that will treat inflammation and help with joint pain almost as well as NSAIDs. If you couple it with fish oil, now you got something going on. And if that still doesn't do it, you can add an herb called boswellia. I've not seen a joint inflammation be able to escape a good curcumin, fish oil, and boswellia in the absence of a bad diet. So a good diet and those things can do you well, do your gut well, and do your joints well. So I want to talk a little bit about more about the neuroendocrine system in the gut. There are specific neuroendocrine cells in your gut that actually live outside the lumen. It's really interesting to me. They live on the outside. And then there are dendritic cells, which are nerves, which dip their tentacles into the gut, kind of like they're little sensors or something, like we might create computer-wise. Hey, nature's got it already, way smarter than us. And then they send messages back through the vagus nerve, which is the biggest nerve in your body, runs up alongside your vena cava and goes to your brain. Gut-brain connection. So your body always has its fingers on what's going on in that gut. And if it's not good, that's when you start, like not thinking right or sensing or feeling anxious or odd, So like I said, a lot of people on antidepressants and antipsychotics, when all they need to do is balance their gut. So that's a pretty important thing to consider. Also in your gut, those neuroendocrine cells produce norepinephrine and epinephrine. So if you don't balance it right, what is norepinephrine and epinephrine? That's your flight or fight neurotransmitters. There's the anxiety. There's those floaty, weird feelings you're getting and you don't know why. So as I mentioned, 95% of the body's serotonin comes from the gut. And there was a great guy back in the past, in 2010, that said something, but I differ with that, but let me just explain it. His name was Michael Gershaw, and he was the chairman of the Department of Anatomy at New York Presbyterian Hospital and Columbia University Medical Center. No slouch, right? And he wrote The Second Brain. But his feeling was the second brain doesn't help with great thought processes, such as religion and philosophy and poetry are left to the brain and the head. Well, meanwhile, these new studies showing that this was before the gut-brain connection was well elucidated. And Emran Meyer has elucidated it quite well. And he describes this intricate, complex communication system between the gut and the mind that sends information not only through the dendrites that I mentioned, but through abundant neuroendocrine cells, amounting to the body's largest endocrine organ and the immune system. So to me, these messages and the complicated communicating molecule definitely interact with the brain and can affect our feelings. So oftentimes we'll see something and we'll feel something, and then we decide what we think about it. So we get that gut feeling, and that's where it really resides. Then we wrap our mind around it when those messages arrive. So feelings are affected, and also possibly a poem, a song, or perhaps warning signals, intuitions. We call them intuitions. So it's a beautiful system, and if we keep our bodies healthy, they'll function correctly and give us the right messages. Another thing I wanted to mention, because people often don't think about it, are the diseases that an unhealthy gut can cause. Not only the arthritis and the diabetes and the things I mentioned, but neurologic diseases. Even Parkinson's, Alzheimer's can come from a bad gut. Who knew? So when I first studied it, I was surprised at that. Also, obesity, because you get the wrong kind of bacteria, it can make you so you can't lose weight. And inflammatory diseases, as I mentioned. Inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmune diseases. There are certain bacteria we know now, like Provotella and Klebsiella, that if you have them, the wrong kind, in your gut, which that GI map test that I mentioned does look for, those are autoimmune triggers. So the longer you leave it, the more apt you're going to get autoimmune disease. One big thing that I haven't mentioned yet is, not just about sugar, but gluten. It's been shown that gluten, especially excessive gluten, can cause inflammation, leaky gut, and if enough of it, long enough, autoimmune disease. So I'm very anti-gluten. So I recommend you do not eat gluten, and it should be considered on the no-no list. Now look, Thanksgiving's coming up, and I don't expect you guys not to celebrate. I'm going to celebrate. I've done vegetarian long enough that I don't really care, but I am going to cook turkey for my family that comes from a restorative farm. If you watch my shows, you know I'm very pro restorative farming. It actually returns the earth to its original state. So you have all the animals that are grouped together. They're all grazing together, the cows, the pigs, the deer, wild animals, the ducks, the chickens, the birds that come in from nature. So nature and the animals that you're raising are all together. They all get along. They know what they're doing. And then they mimic the predator-prey relationship, and they come in and they move them. So they move them from this pasture, this green pasture, to this green pasture over here. And the pasture where they were residing has received all of their excrement and body fluids, and that regrows the grasses. The land is never tilled. Tilling the land is what destroys it, is what has removed the vitamins and the minerals from our foods, our industrial raised foods. Foods that are raised organically are not coming from tilled soil, at least from the restorative farms. They have way more minerals like they originally were. Our industrial raised foods have 80% less minerals and vitamins than they once had. Restoratively farmed vegetables and fruits are closer to what they originally were, call it 100%, let's call it 90%, but way better. Organic is better, but not to the level of restorative farms. Look it up. I just got, like I said, a turkey from a restorative farm, and Primal Pastures it's called here in California, but you can Google it. There are many. They're coming up, and they're advancing. So a balanced microbiome results from diet, self-care, pre- and probiotics, and it's essential for optimal digestion, absorption, and integration of nutrients. It supports the healthy inflammatory response, and it keeps our immune system strong. It also supports our emotions by balancing our neurotransmitters, and it keeps our microbiomes balanced. So some of the really good foods are things like asparagus is a really good prebiotic, sauerkraut or kimchi is a great probiotic food, garlic is a prebiotic, onion is a prebiotic. Apple cider vinegar is something that a lot of people are doing. It's a fad. I don't know if they know why they're doing it, but it stimulates digestive juices and it helps break down foods. It's also anti-COVID. So I'm a big fan of that. Every morning I drink my tea, but my tea is really hot water with a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. It's kind of pleasant. Ginger helps relax the stomach and assist at digestion. And if you have a leaky gut or upset gut, things that soothe it are the glutamine, the licorice, fennel, marshmallow root, or slippery elm. So these are all things that you can look for to heal yourself. So that is my take on leaky gut. That's a lot of trains going on there. There's one more thing I wanted to mention about SIBO. SIBO is really two different diseases. One is because the bacteria have just moved north, perhaps bad diet, not the right amount of motility going on. It could be like diabetes, a lack of motility from that. But Pimentel discovered that a lot of the patients, a segment of the patients, have antibodies to vinculin, which is the protein, or if you will, that is the nerves of your GI tract. Your GI tract has a nervous system, just like anything else, and it causes the sweeping action that moves things south. And some people that have had major food poisoning events has caused them to develop these antibodies to their own nervous system in their GI tract. And that's pretty horrible to have. There are some pro-motility agents we can give. Erythromycin is if they use for pharmacologically. I like to use something called it's a motility activator. It's made by Integrative Therapeutics, and it's herbal. So either one of those two things. But the people that get the antibody to that migrating motor complex, which is the nervous system of your GI tract, it's called a SMART antibody test. And I've done that on a lot of people. And sometimes you find it and sometimes you don't. If you do find it, it helps you because you know that person needs a pro-motility agent. So that's helpful. So do your meditation, do your breathing, do your exercise, keep your stress down. Right now, we're sort of stuck to antibacterial soaps or the cleansers because of the COVID thing. And that's really hard on your microbiome. So keep that in mind. And just be sure to take your probiotics because that's doing damage. Chlorinated water. I have an air filter. I have an air filter, but I also have a water filter. So I don't drink chlorinated water. I recommend you don't because that kills off good bacteria. And then again, the microplastics, not only in water, but in foods. Very deleterious to your microbiome. So keep your gut happy. Eat well. Exercise. Meditate. Don't eat sugar. Eat probiotics. Happy gut, happy life. Give me a call. DM me any questions you have. I will answer them all. And I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye-bye.